We're live.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of Mahone Bay Town Council. Meeting yet again via Zoom as we continue to do workarounds with the COVID scenario. All of council is here tonight and some staff, CAO and the clerk, and there are some people at home that are watching as well. And we'll begin by acknowledging that we are gathered today in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral, present, and future territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Today we gather with the intent followed by the living peace and friendship treaties with respect, cooperation, and coexistence. So with that, I will call the meeting to order. You have an agenda, council, that was emailed to you. What is your wish with the agenda? Councillor Burdick. I move that the agenda.
I'd like to move that the agenda be approved as presented.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
I'd like to propose an addition to the agenda and a closed session.
Okay. All right. So as amended, Councillor Wilson.
Let me, first of all, second the motion, but could I add 2 items to the new business agenda? I'd like to let people know that I plan to introduce 2 motions at the next council meeting.
Okay, notice of motion. Thank you. Okay. Councillor Feeney.
And Mayor, just for clarification, that the Deputy Mayor's amendment is regarding public security?
Yes, it
Yep.
is public security
security.
under 22(2)H of the municipal government.
Fair enough.
Okay. You heard the motion, moved and seconded with amendments. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Let's go to the minutes of the regular meeting of September the 27th.
I'll move the adoption of those minutes.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder?
Second.
Councillor Carver? Okay, moved and seconded. We accept the minutes as presented. On the question, all in favor? Motion is carried. We have no presentations. We have one piece of correspondence dealing with the all ages cycling route. CAO, do you want to speak to that? Or do you feel it's self-explanatory?
Yeah, I should probably put some context on what you're looking at. The typed document is a letter of support for the town's Connect 2 application, was circulated to participants at the Bike Day event that we held in August, and we received a number of signed copies back. But this one was also submitted with a note, and the note, obviously, is the handwritten part, is not intended for the letter of support, but it was intended as a note as feedback to council. So that's just provided here. Regardless of the written part, it's the handwritten part is what's being provided as correspondence.
Okay, thank you. Would we entertain a motion to thank the sender for the letter, or Councillor Carver?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that council direct staff to reply to the letter and describe with a description of the status of the project that the writer referred to in her letter.
Okay. Councillor Burdick, second. Thank you. Motion's been moved and seconded. Have staff, direct staff to write to the originator, describe the status of the project. The CAO, do we have a list of people who signed the document on the Bike Day?
It wasn't signed on the day. It was just circulated to participants of the day. I think we had 4 signed copies back. I know Rosemary and Bicycle Nova Scotia, and I think there were 2 others.
it might be well to let them all know what the project status is.
Yeah, well, when we know, they'll certainly be excited to know, but that one we haven't heard back from yet. So right
Okay,
now the project status is just pending.
thank you, CAO. You've heard the motion? All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Let's go to we have 3 items on information correspondence. All are different Monday memos from NSFM. What is your wish? Councilor
Mayor,
Feeney?
Mayor, I'd move that we receive and file the correspondence.
Thank you. Councilor Carver?
I'll second the motion. And as part of discussion, just want to note that the NSFM conference scheduled for November 3rd and 4th, and the early bird registration deadline is October 15th, which is next week.
3 more, yeah, tomorrow's the
Okay.
13th. Yeah.
Right, so it'll be the end of day
So
Friday.
Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's $150 more if you miss the early bird deadline.
I think it's only 50 more.
Oh, I thought it was more than that.
If
But
it were
it is 2 days, 2 days on video, and then on the 3rd day, the 5th, is the town caucus meeting, which typically lasts about an hour. So thank you for reminding us of that, Councillor Carver. You heard the motion to receive and file. All in favor? Motion's carried. CAO, if a councillor wishes to participate in the NSFM conference, what's the procedure?
These days, I think people are directed just to write in directly, but we could certainly take in names and write in on your
Yeah.
behalf if anybody wants to go through the office. They don't charge up front. They come back and charge the unit for
After
whoever.
the fact.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the procedure online does allow for the individual to contact NSFM and register, and they'll bill us later.
Yeah, I think it's kind of shifted that. It used to be that you get all the names together, but I think you can just contact them directly.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go to staff reports. The staff report to council, CAO, that be your part, Chip? Does anyone have any comments or questions for the CAO on the staff report? Councillor Feeney.
Hi, this is just a quick one for the CAO. On the cemetery, under the cemetery category and the discussion around the fence initiative, there's some commentary about our procedure and moving forward with, I think it was tracking down some quotes was the vernacular used. I'm just wondering, do we expect that project will go to RFP, or will we just solicit bids from the local area?
So yeah, I think that's a little bit of a miscommunication in a sense. Jonathan had put out looking for quotes on prefabricated fence options, which have come in. But understanding council's decision around the looking for a local, looking for it to be constructed in a traditional manner from wood, that opens it up to a lot more local bidders. So we would do a published tender. But these are still, helpful to provide some context in that regard. So
Okay.
yeah, he continued the process of collecting them since he'd asked for them.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Carver, I think you had some questions about the report.
Yes, I did. And Mr. Hyde has kindly replied to my email, and it's been copied to everybody. So we have.
Sorry, it was so last minute, Councillor Carver.
That's right. Thank you. It's there anyhow if anybody wants to check their messages. But so one of the questions was about the agenda for the Policy and Strategy Committee at the end of the month. And the CAO confirmed that the agenda would include review of the Age-Friendly Community Committee and the Economic Development Committee and the Council CAO relationship. there was a discrepancy in the staff report about that agenda. And I had a question about a letter going to Captain Boudreau about his question about traffic on Main Street, and the delay in formally responding to Captain Boudreau was to be sure that the information was up to date about when council would be receiving a staff report. And that's anticipated for the October 20th meeting. And the letter to Captain Boudreau is expected to go out tomorrow. And the submission to the Coastal Protection Act consultation has been copied to all councillors. And I had asked about next steps in developing the fire services bylaw. So apparently there's been a lot of feedback from the fire department members following the stakeholders public meeting in September. And staff are working on a draft bylaw to be presented to council, the Policy Strategy Committee, when it's ready. So that the draft would come first to council and then be referred to committee, possibly. And the water garden signage. So I asked about the status of the discussion with the Quinlan about the entrance to the water garden from Main Street, coming through the Quinlan property. And Mr. Hyde advised that the Quinlan board doesn't see this as an urgent item from their perspective. So, but they're happy to continue discussions. So you want to take over on this one?
Well, just to add a little extra commentary on that one, because
Yeah.
I know we've talked about this before. So the option that we were looking at originally, we were discussing with just a couple of members of the executive, and it was determined that that option that we'd been talking about, they didn't want to take it forward to the rest of the executive. We talked about the possibility of other options, including, would it be able to cross another property? There is another property that bounds on the same side as the Quinlan. Essentially, the discussion is around the boundary of that pond and whether it's possible to come around the pond on either other side. We really couldn't go any further as far as that goes without properly understanding the accessibility requirements that would be entailed, because it seems easy, talk about a little path and snake around here, but it could become much more complicated.
Yeah.
So I still look forward to being able to come up with a plan, and hopefully the Quinlan board will support it at that time. But they were not interested in going forward on the proposal that we had originally floated, and we're not prepared yet with any other options.
Okay, to be continued. So I just want to check at this time with Mr. Hyde about questions on the staff report. I've sort of developed a habit now of sending them in writing beforehand, thinking that might give staff a chance to think about them before being asked, on the fly during council meetings. Is there a preference for either way from staff?
No, either way is fine. If you understand that you're not always going to be able to get to the questions sooner, but if you get them to me, I'll try to get answers early enough that you don't have to read them all out in the meeting, but you can decide if there's some highlights that you want to be able to share. I know you hadn't had a chance to even look at these ones yet. So I would always encourage people to send some questions ahead of time, especially if they might require looking into.
Thank you.
Councillor Burdick.
Thank you. Found my unmute button. I did wonder if the shared committee with Riverport Electric had met yet, because I think there was going to be a meeting sometime in the fall, and just wondered if that had happened yet, or if that's yet to happen, or if it's been scheduled.
Oh, as Kelly knows well, because we chat about this pretty often, it has not happened yet. The idea was that they hadn't met for quite some time as a commission. They were going to have a commission meeting and an AGM, and from there, determine who was going to be on the committee on their end, and we'd sit down and they'd be in that position till their next AGM, I understand. So we just haven't had that take place according to the original timeframes. It is still expected anytime now. I don't want to comment on, internal scheduling there, but as soon as we are able, we'll look forward to sitting down and on a staff level, continue to be in very close coordination. But I understand it could get the coordination back between the council and the commission.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Just two quick questions because I'm just not clear. On the staff report, page 8, there's a comment, an ongoing comment about the Pro Kids program with MODL. And I was under the impression that we gave up on that and just said, well, forget about trying to organize an official agreement and just continue with the status quo. Am I mistaken in that?
I don't know. I do remember talking about it. I'm sorry. I think I assumed that we were still in the long term interested in agreement, but I may be I may be forgetting some conversation at budget times. I think we talked about this during the budget. I know we were contributing to their program, but whether we were seeking to do anything other than that, and we have made a contribution like in accordance with the budget, but whether we're seeking to do anything other than just make contributions as a donation, maybe we should revisit it, have another discussion about that if I may be mistaken. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Okay.
And the other thing I wanted to ask is, I noticed on page 36, there's an item, a capital item, a Fairmont extension, $100,000. And I'm guessing that is for paving Fairmont Street right out to the end. Is that correct? Or is that just the turnaround for the snowplows? Or is it something else?
For Fairmont Street, that was actually the initial assessment to put water down to the end of the street, which was done up by Kent back before the budget, but then subsequently we've had a lot more discussion.
Okay. All right. So that's in the budget as we speak.
Yes, it is in the budget. Yeah. And now council's direction is to come back with a comparison of costs and other factors relating to either just the Cleveland property or the entire street. But, obviously we won't be in a position to do the work. We'd have to do more engineering over the winter and break ground in the spring if we do decide to proceed with one of those two options.
If I could just continue, Your Worship, for 1 second.
Yes, please.
Back in my former life, there was an item on the agenda or on the budget throughout my term that had to do with making a turnaround at the end of Fairmont Street for our snowplows. And like many of our projects, it never got done, and I guess it's fallen off the table. But is that possibly in the works as well, or is that no longer relevant?
Yeah, if it maybe has fallen off the table, it would not be inappropriate to do a quick motion saying that staff get a estimate of the paving of Fairmont Street for the 2022-23 budget process. If because I don't think it's on the list right now, but it's not a hard one to add.
And hopefully we would have the water and sewer issue resolved before we pave the street.
Yeah, well, there was no expectation of paving with that, so council make that decision first, and then in next year's budget process, if you want to do the paving.
Wouldn't be the first time, CAO. So
would you would like to have a motion for a staff report on paving to the end of Fairmont? Oh, I'm sorry, Your Worship, I just spoke.
no, that sounds, I think that's what the CAO was suggesting.
Yeah, it would just be a motion to get an estimate for the 2022-23 budget. I don't think unless there is a staff report, right now I'm not thinking there's anything other than the number.
But is the other report that staff have been directed to do on the cost of water and sewer just to the first house on the street, or is it to the end of the street?
We have two separate reports that were requested, and
Okay,
the intention was to try to get the first report to the Cleveland property as soon as we can, and then follow up with the other one. And
Okay.
if there was a possibility to do the water for the Cleveland property in November, depending on the weather, the council
Okay.
might have that option still.
so Councillor Carver's motion that we still have to have seconded complements those other two staff reports. Okay.
Yeah.
Do we have a seconder for Councillor Carver's? Councillor Wilson seconds the motion? You heard the motion, moved and
Mayor-
seconded, all in favor?
Mayor, I have a question about that. So is that request for that piece of that capital project, like, is that being driven by staff requesting that? Like, is the turnaround for the snowplow at the end of Fairmont a newly prioritized item that's due to a staff request? Like, I'm just wondering, like, why, I'm just wondering where this is coming from.
Yeah.
Like,
This is
I've
the
never-
I
first-
do
this-
recall, as Mr. Wilson, or Councillor Wilson suggested, it was raised as an issue in a previous council. However,
Just to answer the question of Councillor Feeney, this is the first I've heard of it, so it's not coming from staff now, but it maybe did come from staff originally.
Well,
okay,
would it, I mean, so I'm no harm, no foul on the motion. I'm certainly willing to support it, but I'm just wondering if really we should ask the operations staff if that's something that they even want or need.
Councillor Burdick.
Yes, I was wondering the same thing as Councillor Feeney, because this is sort of the first that I'm hearing about it. Not that I'm sure things have come up many times in previous councils, but it would seem to me that the question would be, is this a necessary? It would be worth investigating to see if this is something that is even desired or desirable in the next budget before making a motion to investigate the cost of the. You know what I mean? It sort of seems
Yeah.
like,
So that certainly would be more of a motion for staff report, which is fine if that's, yeah.
that would be my modification.
Not to
Councillor
belabor,
Feeney?
I guess I'm just looking at in the context of all the other heavy lifting that the CAO and the staff has to do. We have a number of other items later on in the agenda. I think even in this staff report, it looks like we're waiting for the economic analysis on the virtues of the line extension. It's going to be February before we get an answer back. So, given that that kind of timeline is required to turn around this due diligence, I'm just wondering how much more we want to add to the plate.
Deputy Mayor, you had a comment?
No, I think Joe has captured it well. And the issue is just priorities. It's a good motion, but in terms of priorities, we've already sort of, in many ways, seen the workload that staff have. So if we can avoid burdening them with something that we haven't prioritized, that would be good.
Okay. Well, we do have a motion on the table. Councillor Carver.
Procedurally, you'll have to direct this, but I'm just wondering about a motion to withdraw the motion that's on the table.
Well, you can't make that motion until we deal with this other motion. But the mover of the motion can always request to withdraw the motion.
Well, I'll do it that way then. I am happy to withdraw the motion, having heard the opinion, the ideas of the other council members.
Okay. The seconder of the motion?
Your Worship, I'm happy to withdraw my secondment, but I was going to raise the issue, because it's been raised before by Councillor Feeney, about the fact that there's a vast swath of stuff in this report that is not started yet, all the way down the piece. I was assuming this would just get added to that list. My concern is, and I think Councillor Feeney shares the same concern, is that we load up the budget every year with all of these items. Some of them need matching funds, some don't. There's $15,000 here and $5,000 there. We end up with a bottom line of $2.6 million or whatever it is, and we tax the citizens accordingly. And then we don't do the projects, and we end up with a large surplus, and that goes into one or other of the contingency funds. And in my world, that's no way to run a railway.
Okay. Didn't even know we had a railway. However, Good point,
Yeah,
Councillor
I walk on it every day.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. So we have withdrawn, the mover and the seconder have agreed to withdraw their motion until we get a better sense of whether or not paving that piece of Fairmont, which is already being investigated for water and sewer, whether or not it would be a priority for the future, and how soon in the future it would be a priority. Okay? All right. I have one question. This is in light of the PIM that we had last week, and I was talking today with the CAO and I were having a chat about the traffic statistic reports for Kinburn and Claremont streets, and they are buried in police advisory board minutes. I did look at 3 or 4 meetings today, was unable to find the numbers for those for Claremont and Kinburn. I'm just wondering if staff could gather those numbers up and share it with council, because one of the big discussions about the proposed development on Claremont Street was the impact on traffic. And that would give us a good picture of how many cars per day are using that Claremont Kinburn Street and the speeds that they're traveling, keeping in mind that it was before the Main Street stop sign came into being. So the numbers may be even higher now. But anyway, if staff could provide us with that information.
Just to send all of the sheets to council members, or do you want a summary of the information as a report, or what would be most helpful?
Well, for me, it's just the information sheets that would be typically published in the police advisory board minutes. The
You mean
number of
going all the
cars
way
per
back,
day,
right? You don't just mean the most recent ones.
the ones for Claremont and Kinburn, whatever the
Okay.
most recent ones are.
Whatever we can find for those ones.
If we've done it
Yeah,
more than once, then the most recent.
well, we can certainly do that.
Okay. Anything else from the staff report? Okay. Hearing no further questions, CAO, clerk, do you want to add anything?
No, we can just get a motion to accept.
A motion to accept the report for information. Moved by Councillor Feeney, seconded by Councillor Now to accept this report for information. All in favor? The motion is carried. Thank you. Let's go to 6.2, the staff report on the Climate Action Committee. Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, I had a couple questions about this item, specifically kind of like the makeup of the committee, and its mandate, and kind of our overall objectives around adding incremental new committees to council, kind of as a theme. I know at our next policy meeting, I believe we are having a discussion around some dormant committees, specifically economic development and the age-friendly committee.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering whether, rather than kind of litigating the merits of this committee and its, inevitably fine work, and I think Martha did a nice job on the package. I'm wondering if we might want to have a more fulsome conversation about kind of the committees as a whole, and consolidate this discussion and defer this discussion till after we have that meeting, so we can kind of figure out how many more committees we can physically staff with the hours in a month. Anyway, those are just a few thoughts.
Okay. Anyone else? Councillor Carver.
Yes, I just support those sentiments.
Okay.
And so that we have an overall picture of our committee structure.
Councillor CAO?
Oh, I just want to say procedurally, Councillor Feeney, you had suggested deferring this one till after that meeting, but maybe referring this one to that meeting, to the upcoming meeting of the policy and strategy. Because, once it's discussed there, it doesn't need to be action separately back at council. It can be whatever is decided there is a recommendation to council. So that you wouldn't want it on the agenda twice, is what I'm saying.
Okay. So,
I think,
Councillor
look, I think that's a good idea. I think that'll be in the context of having that, kind of 2-hour meeting. I think we can have a fulsome discussion with the benefit of having the memo. And we can talk about whether we want to proceed right away, or we want to, who would be on the committee, and if we have the right distribution between town councilors and community members. And anyway, so
Okay.
I'm prepared to make that motion.
A motion to refer it to the Strategy and Policy Committee?
Yes.
Okay. Councillor Carver, do you second?
I do.
Okay. You've heard the motion. Deputy Mayor, comment?
Yeah, just a comment. I think it's a good process or good way to, I guess, look at this. The only question I have is when we have that conversation, if we're going to lump this up there, will we be looking at all the committees as a whole and sort of having that prioritization kind of conversation, or are we saying just the three, basically, and talking about those? Because I would be interested in talking about the whole package, because then
All of the committees?
it makes sense if we're going to do that piece where we're talking about prioritization. It would be good to see the whole picture rather than just those three by themselves.
Okay.
Sounds good to me.
Councillor Carver, you agree?
Yes, I absolutely agree. And that was my thinking when I earlier said to get an overview of the overall committee structure, so that we'll be making those decisions about the age-friendly and the economic development committee in the context of the larger picture, as well as including the discussion or conversation about the climate change, climate action advisory committee. I mean, that's
Okay.
quite a big discussion, so it might use up
is.
the whole 2 hours. Yeah.
It is. You've heard the motion, moved and seconded. All in favor? The motion is carried. The item is referred to Policy and Strategy Committee. Let's go to the Fire Station Temporary Borrowing Resolution Renewal. CAO, you want to give us the details?
Well, just that TBRs have to be renewed on an annual basis, and this one won't actually be needed until we are finished with the work. You can only go to MFC when the project is actually finished. So it will be later this year. It will be within this renewal. We won't need to do this again, but we do need to do it again now. And the only other note would be that since we did this initially, we obviously have added to the scope of the fire station project with the addition of the hall extension on there. But as we looked at that time, with the upfront payments being what we anticipate, which should actually be able to accommodate the borrowing for the full project within this original approved amount.
Okay. Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, just a question for the CAO. This borrowing resolution, like this number, I'm just trying to reconcile in my mind what's driving this number. Is this the original fixed price capital cost of the approved plan, the i.e. the 3.8 million plus the $250,000 for the hall, and like, do we know kind of the itemization, Dylan? I'm sure you do. Is that something that maybe Luke could just, I'm sure the number's right. Is there a protocol around why we're lumping it well, when we're talking to the community about the fire hall, I've always been using 3.8 million plus the incremental decision to based on the borrowing and the other 250, but maybe it is that much money. Is this also including our, this isn't including the money that's out of the capital reserve, is it? It's just the borrowing?
So this is just the borrowing, but this actually, to your question, isn't designed that way. It's not a new number. It doesn't actually come from adding up numbers that we now know. It comes from an estimate before we'd even gone as far as having an awarded contract for construction. So this number was established at that stage so that we could go and get permission to borrow. Basically because of the significant size of this project, we wanted the minister's approval for the borrowing before we went out and made any commitments around the work. So this is based on like preliminary estimates. It was a significant overestimation with respect to the original phase of the work. But now that we've added to it, this is actually sufficient, as I was saying, I think, to accommodate the borrowing for both portions, not including our upfront contribution or that of the department.
I was just waiting for an angry phone call from John Bain. It was gonna,
as
soon as he read that number, there'd be a phone call.
Because at this point we wouldn't change the number because then we wouldn't be going for a renewal. We'd be going for a whole new approval. Yeah.
A whole new set of money.
Thank you. I appreciate that clarification. That puts my mind at ease.
Okay. Other questions? Counselor Now.
I would just move that we do the renewal.
Okay. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I would second it, but I'll make a suggestion that maybe in the future when when we're being asked to review it, it'd be great if the signed copy of the last one was shared alongside it, because that question would probably have been answered if that copy was shared alongside this current one, so that it's just a renewal of this one. We're just asking for you to renew it. Yeah.
Is that doable, Mr. Hyde? I'm sure we must keep a copy of what we signed off for the bank.
Yeah, that's what I was just looking at here in terms of the previous. So what's attached here is the previous one because it was pursuant to a resolution passed the 14th day of July 2020. So that's page 3 of this. This is the original resolution. I know it's not a signed copy of it, but.
And then that's why I was saying the signed copy, so that question basically is answered in that process, right? Doesn't even occur. You're just renewing what you signed last time.
Yeah, I'm sure Luke just had this version handy and didn't. I'm sure we would mean to include the signed version normally. I'm not sure why it's not the signed version on here.
So we'll just make a note for Mr. Wenzel that in the future, as the deputy mayor has suggested, we would have the signed copy of the document that is being renewed.
Yeah, it would look just like this one, but with the signatures on it.
Yeah, that's what makes it legal, is having the signatures on it. Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, so I do think, so this is clear to me now. So I think the motion, I'm certainly going to support the motion, but I do think that the conversation around the budgets and the pricing and of the fire hall is important for us to communicate clearly. And so fair enough. This is not the budget of the fire hall, and the other nuance is that part of the borrowing that we're doing on behalf of the fire department, we are essentially backstopping it, but there's a revenue stream to support it, i.e. the $500,000 in loan is not being borne by the tax base. So I do think we should avail ourselves of any opportunity we have to speak really clearly about the fact that when if you're reading an article next week about this, it's true, the borrowing, the $4.4 million is not necessarily the budget for the fire hall, because I think the theme here is that the fire hall as originally constructed, the original approved project is on time, on budget. Within the context of a contingency as well. I think that's the key message, isn't it, Dylan? That the the Roscoe project phase 1 before the hall is that we haven't seen any material overrun there.
Yeah, no, I mean that's certainly the story as far as the original phase. Like it's going to make it look like we have because we've added a lot of scope to the project in that
Right.
time. So we have to tell that story as well as that, this is only one project that we've added to. It's not actually two projects. So yeah. But no, we haven't had any I mean, it's been a while. We had a couple of little details with the design, but they were all design decisions rather than big cost overruns or anything. And the nature of the design build, of course, is that the fluctuations in the market have been Roscoe's to manage, as far as that goes.
Okay. Any other comments? Councillor Now, there is a motion in your package if you'd care to make it. You're on mute, sir.
I don't have that motion right here in front of me.
Okay. Well,
I can read
it's
it.
been moved that council approved the temporary borrowing resolution renewal for the fire station project in the amount of $4,456,600.
So
Is that your motion?
that's my motion.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Deputy Mayor seconds. Okay, you've heard the motion. On the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Let's go next to the winterization of comfort stations. And
So,
CAO, did you
yeah,
want to
just
talk
briefly
first
to
about
introduce
that?
this one. So we have had a few years at least, and probably for those who've been on council longer, maybe discussions around the possible winterization of the comfort stations for a long time. This discussion dates back to last January when the council received a request from the chamber and chamber Chair Phillips in this regard. And when we did the budget process for the year, we did approve the capital work to make these improvements to allow the washrooms to be open over the winter months or some part thereof. We had subsequently applied to ACOA. It was one of a number of components that were included in our grant application. We have not heard back in that regard at this point, but I felt that, in discussion with the chamber, if there was going to be any work done this year, that it was necessary that this report be put in front of council now. Obviously, there are other options, including waiting to find out about the status of the external funding and conducting the work most likely next year if the funding was approved, or at such a time as it was possible to do it without any commitment as far as this season. Obviously, the washrooms are slated to close at the end of this month. So the recommendation here is to proceed based on council's original approval of the money, which was not contingent on the money for the capital, which was not contingent on external funding. Obviously, we did not budget for any actual operation into the off season this year, and that's reflected in the report. So in discussion with the chamber, obviously they would like to see the washrooms continue to be open, particularly because a lot of businesses are directing people there due to COVID closure of their own washrooms. And still note that, even on the independent store, when you go in, there's a big sign that says, where our washrooms are closed, you're directed over to the town's washrooms because of COVID. So that's essentially the request, but it wasn't funded, wasn't in our budget. And I did make a note in there with regards to Safe Restart funding. So that may be a kind of a gray area. You might remember back in November of last year, we reported on the award of Safe Restart funding. It appeared in our bank account without our being told what the deal was, what it was for, how we could use it. And at the time, we had hoped that we could use it to support the renovation of the town office. It was later clarified that we could not use it for that purpose. We could use it for operating costs only. And so we have had other operating costs as a result of COVID, of course, and we will have more this year, including the pool, additional costs the council did budget. But we didn't reflect this as revenue in either year. So this money, hasn't been applied yet. It would be applied to offset unexpected expenditures or expenditures that we did expect that were related to COVID. So I just made that note because any consideration this is an unbudgeted expenditure could take into consideration that we have unbudgeted revenue associated with the Save Restart money pursuant to the Chamber's specific request about this fall in November and December of this year. That being said, Council's direction be required to proceed with either the capital or operating parts of this recommendation, and I'm here to take any questions if there are any.
Councillor Wilson, then Councillor Carver.
I would like to move that council direct staff to proceed with the planned renovation of the comfort station on Edward Street and Main Street for year-round use, and that the operation of the comfort station for 2021 be extended until December 24th, and that a letter be written to Jeff Phillips informing him of such.
Thank you. Councillor Burdick, second? Okay. We have a motion that's moved and seconded on the question.
I'd like to
Councillor
speak.
Carver. And then
Yes,
Councillor Feeney.
Thank
And
you.
then Deputy Mayor.
I am in favor of the keeping the winterizing the comfort stations. I mean, it's been an issue for such a long time, and clearly it's important to the business community. But I do have a question about the linkage to the strategic plan. So it's been cited here that the link to the strategic plan is the item 2.2, provide equitable services to support growth. And the sub-point is strategically expand existing infrastructure to support planned growth and development. I'm just feeling that it's a bit of a stretch to link the comfort stations to that point in the strategic plan.
Okay. CAO, respond?
Yeah, I guess it all depends on how we talk about existing infrastructure. The town has in the past made I don't know how you want to call it, the provision of washroom services, a key part of the services that we provide. So expanding the infrastructure used to provide those services to support the business community would seem to be related. I understand we're usually talking about traditional piped services, but the public washrooms is a very specific service that the town at some point in the past, took on. So that's why I've looked at it that way, but I understand it is unconventional.
Thank you. I do see that the idea of strategically expanding existing infrastructure is relevant. It's the support planned growth and development that I didn't quite get, because I do think about that as development of areas to build. So I'm still not clear on that part, but just wanted to make that point.
Councillor Feeney and then Deputy Mayor.
Mayor, I recall a motion of council about 6 or 7 months ago that council was requesting a formal meeting with the Mahone Bay Chamber to discuss a variety of things, one of which would be the comfort stations. And this kind of was an outcome of the increase of financial support that the town gave a year ago to support the higher costs associated with COVID related to the operations of the comfort station. We were told a couple months ago that meeting was deferred into this fall, and now I see in the staff report that it's been deferred until March of 2022, and the chamber finally has time to meet with council. So I do have concerns about the economic sustainability of that operation, where the costs have gone from high teens to 20 to 24 and now $35,000 a year. That's a substantial expense increase that's not funded and not budgeted and not prioritized previously, and will be funded from where, and what won't we fund to make this expansion? And so I'm just surprised that this unbudgeted, unfunded initiative has been prioritized to this level, given that we have no line of sight on where the expense money is going to come to fund it. And $15,000 increase, or is it $10,000, going from $25,000 up from 20 last year? We haven't seen the financial statements yet, but I believe the budget was 25 this year. I'm not sure where the actuals came in. Now we're talking $35,000 a year of expenses. I mean, that's triple what we give the pool. You know, that's a big operating expense. And I would have preferred for us to have a frank conversation about the give and take with the business association before we move this item forward. I do think it's a lot of money and funded by citizens who have an expectation that the taxes are not going to spike materially, and this is just adding another half a cent to the pain.
Deputy Mayor. And then Councillor Now.
I wish I'd gone before Joe, and so I thank you for that. I appreciate that the nuance of that. My question was more around. So I think it's a necessity in the town. Who gets to fund it is a good question. I was just curious as to why we are improving its success in the winter, and then we cut it off at a particular date, and then it's not accessible for the rest of the winter. I would have appreciated that conversation with the chamber to sort of figure out how can it be open all year round, because I think that's what would be helpful for that I guess facility and its benefit to the town.
Thank you. CAO, you going to respond to Deputy Mayor?
Just putting into the context of the chamber's suggestion that we meet with them in the new year rather than now. And I think the idea that we would extend till Christmas of this year would then be a point of discussion, you know, having that sit down with the new executive of the new year. Council could discuss, you know, the remaining gap to be closed, and in particular, you know, how that would be financed. So that's still a discussion that I think that at least the current chair would envision taking place, but with the new executive. So maybe this could be considered a 2-month trial with COVID, you know, being in a mitigating circumstance.
Thank you. Councillor Now, and then Councillor Burdick.
Yeah, the CAO answered a couple of my questions regarding the chamber, but I supported this down the road. I would prefer that we met with the chamber first, and they seem to be putting it off until next year. So I would really like to see what their take is on it firsthand and what they have to say about it. I know that they're certainly in favor of it. I mean, why wouldn't they be? And like I say, I would down the road, but as of right now, I think it is a lot of unbudgeted expense, extra expense. And I think that we should be meeting with the chamber before we actually go ahead with the project. We, you know, for this year, maybe we could keep it open until December without the winterization. I don't know what that would mean in costs or what labor or anything like that, but just on maybe we would could look at it depending on weather.
I think if I could, Councillor Now, one of the problems is the current structural arrangements don't withstand the cold temperatures one would typically encounter in November and December, which is why staff would shut the places down at the end of October. Don't quote me on that. Councillor Burdick.
Thank you. It's a very interesting discussion. I think it goes beyond the business community's interest, though. Also, it's a big issue in terms of accessibility in general. It's come up in other larger discussions in terms of accessibility for people who require washrooms, and that's one of the hardest things to find out there in the world for people. It was something that maybe was more common in the past, where there were public washrooms distributed everywhere. So not only would it support the business community in terms of tourism and extending that, especially through COVID, it would be a good investment, yes, for infrastructure in general. So I do understand the concerns about expense and where it's coming from, and that needs to have a good discussion, but I think it's it is sort of a necessity at this point.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Yes, I just wanted to explain briefly why I moved the motion. leaving aside the question of why we budgeted a capital item to renovate the washrooms and then didn't budget any money to run them. To Councillor Feeney's point, I just quickly looked at the staff report for October the 12th, and you can pick any one of a number of projects in there that would be funded out of our operating account that are not going to get done this year. So the way I would look at that $10,000 is, first of all, it's a one-off. It's only this year. And secondly, it'll just reduce our surplus by $10,000.
Thank you. A lot of Deputy Mayor.
So I think in many, I support us going ahead, but I think that conversation needs to happen because I think it's, I understand it's a necessity, but the practical nature of the way council runs is that the money has to come somewhere. And I think that's a challenge right here, because it cannot, if we're going to, if it's going to impact the budget on an ongoing basis, there has to be a rationale as to why that's happening. And so if we say that it's a priority for us to do it, then the public has to understand, all the residents have to understand why it's a priority. And I don't think we've had that, I guess, that conversation. So I think that discussion with the chamber might be very helpful. They might be willing to help and chip in. It's just that we haven't had that conversation. Right.
Councillor Feeney?
Right. So,
And then Councillor Carver.
you know, I think everyone around the table will agree, like, the capital is the easy part. And it's always been the easy part. It's always been, you know, 6,000 or 10,000 or 20,000. I mean, that we have sources to fund capital initiatives. We've talked about them many times. We have deed transfer tax and gas tax, and municipality might be getting more money from the provincial government after the last election, and so on and so forth. What we don't have is we don't have operating expense. And $35,000 operating expense is one of the town's largest operating expenses. That's almost as much money as we pay for all the chemicals for the entire water treatment facility annually. Like that, it's a big number. So all I'm suggesting is that for 460 taxpayers to be paying $35,000 in operating expense, there needs to be a conversation with the business community that we might need them to do more, as the commercial assessment has declined every year for the last 7 years, and the tax rate has come down as well. So we as a council over the last 5 years have reduced the burden on the commercial taxpayers and increased the relative ratio of burden on domestic households. And fair enough, and we've made decisions, and maybe that was rational, but there has to be a balance on who pays and based on who benefits. And I have a difficult time thinking I'm going to go talk to Emily Rose on Maple Street and say that, you know, her tax contribution of another $80 a year is going to go to fund incremental operating expense of the washrooms for the other 10 weeks, regardless of the merits. So, I mean, when you break it down to what one person pays, I mean, everybody in town paying another $100 a year more in property tax to fund this decision. So I think this is a good conversation. And I mean, everybody, I think, is open-minded about it. But I do think that that we have to make the hurdle a little higher. We've been trying to have a meeting with the Business Association for a year, and they haven't come to the table, and now they don't want to come until March. So I don't know. It gives me pause.
Okay, Councillor Carver.
Perhaps I've misconstrued some of the information, but my understanding is that the motion on the floor is to keep the comfort centers open this year until December 24th. And I also understood from the CAO's report that the additional $10,000 in operating costs for that extension are likely to be covered by the Safe Restart funding, so that I'm not sure where the additional demand on our budget or the tax base is that Councillor Feeney's referring to.
Deputy Mayor.
I think the issue is that once you do that, next year you won't have the same restart, right? And so it's good to do it now, but knowing that down the road you're building a budget that has nobody funding it, so to speak.
Oh, I understand that. But I also had the idea that we would do it for this period, have the meeting with the business community, and then review the whole situation going forward. So I'm going to support the
Councillor
motion.
Now, sorry. Councillor Now?
Yeah, just thinking about it. I wonder during those extra months where it's colder or winter, that type of thing, how much use the washroom at the government wharf, which is away from the business district, is going to get used. If maybe we could cut the operating expense down some by only having the washroom across from the Irving open during that extended period of time.
Okay. Thoughts?
Yeah, I guess I don't have any evidence because obviously, as you said, Councillor, now we don't know because we haven't had it open before. So I'm not sure what we would go by.
Councillor Wilson, then Councillor Carver.
I just to say that I think Councillor Now's point is a very good one. Probably cut the cost in half. But I really think this $5,000 or $10,000 of extra costs is a tempest in a teapot, and we passed lots of resolutions to spend lots more money than that was unbudgeted in the last 11 months.
Not on expense items.
Councillor Carver.
Yes. So point one is I don't see it. I see it as a one-off right now because we haven't committed to doing it forever. But my reaction to Councillor Now's suggestion, which was first to think, oh, that's a good idea, and then I thought, well, but that's a little bit unfair to the businesses that are located at that end of the of Main Street. Just a thought.
Deputy Mayor, do you have a comment? No? Okay. Okay, we have a motion on the table. Councillor Feeney, did you want to comment again on the motion?
I don't think I've ever seen an unbudgeted expense get approved before. I mean, not in my 5 years on council. So this is going to be unique. I mean, I take Councillor Wilson's point that we make decisions periodically on capital initiatives, but like a in perpetuity increase of expense that's not budgeted or deliberated during the budget process. It is unusual that we would add this other than for salaries for a staff position. But anyway, we'll play it out. I mean, there's no wrong or right here. It's just about the timing and who should come to the table and advocate for it. Like, I mean, I don't know. I don't understand how this level of advocacy occurred to the point where this item got prioritized over any other major operating expense item that we had to defer. Anyway, I made my point, I think.
CAO.
Oh, I just wanted to make it clear that I'm not taking it as in perpetuity. I understand some of the business community may, and maybe that's what Councillor Feeney, you mean to imply is that it's hard to walk back from. But from my perspective, this is a COVID-specific measure that we're doing for 2 months out of 2021. And we would certainly be discussing in next year's budget process, or before that, hopefully you're meeting with the chamber. We're not going into next year's budget on the assumption that these are the hours. It's always closed end of October unless council makes a commitment in the long term. I don't see this as an in perpetuity commitment. So I just wanted to clarify what's being presented here.
You're quite right, CAO. COVID in particular is impacting the restaurants in town, where they make it clear that the washrooms are for clients only. Most of our retail shops don't have a bathroom to accommodate the public. They've got a little water closet stuck over in the corner, that the clerk is trying to keep clean, but they don't typically offer washrooms to the public, and certainly they're not accessible facilities. The one at the wharf and the one at the Irving station, or the gas station across the street from it, are the only two that are not, well, maybe they're available, maybe they're not, but not in this store, but over in that store, but I can't get my chair in the stall. I think it's something, on the one hand, we're encouraging people to come to Mahone Bay. We are trying to expand the shoulder season of our retail services. This has been on the table for a long time, albeit with lesser priority. I think it's something, as the deputy mayor is wont to say, that council can show some leadership in dealing with our public by providing them with an opportunity to, quote, go to the bathroom, unquote. And that's what it comes down to. So with that, we do have a motion. It's been moved, it's been seconded to undertake the necessary renovations to operate the comfort centers basically year round. We may not operate them after December 24th, but they would be capable of being operated, which they're not now. They don't have heat and the water pipes are not appropriate. However, on the motion, we've had the question, we've had the discussion. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The motion is carried. Thank you. Deputy Mayor, did you want to comment?
Just wanted to comment and sort of say, I think Joe's point is very valid, and we need to have that conversation, and there needs some emphasis for the chamber to come to the table sooner rather than later. It seems to me kind of odd that we wouldn't be able to meet the chamber when we have to wait until now. It's been a year or so. There's something going on there that I don't fully understand.
Perhaps the CAO, that this can be an inducement to the chair of the chamber to find the time to come in and meet with council before March, April, to have discussions.
So I just want to get some, we're off the discussion on the motion, it's passed. Okay, I just want to get some clarity around, so the chair's suggestion is that in order to meet with the larger group, which was council's request, that the meeting take place in the new year after their internal process to elect executive members. We haven't asked Chair Phillips to meet individually with council. I expect that he would be willing. He's always cited availability of other members as the reason why it's difficult to meet. So if council wants to, I'm happy to extend an invitation directly to just the chair to meet. I want to make it clear that it hasn't been an unwillingness on his part. It's just that every time we ask for the larger group, we're told that everybody's busy and they're not available.
Council, would you like to meet with the chair?
Does he
Sure.
does he speak for the chamber? That's, I guess that's
Well,
a big,
I mean, to the
becomes
extent
the
that he's at
dilemma.
the end of his
If we're
term,
talking about a financial commitment of any kind,
yeah,
can he unilaterally make that commitment?
And he's at the end of his term, so in that sense, that's why he's suggesting that he's not the one to talk. But I really wouldn't want to give council the impression that he wouldn't be willing. I think his suggestion is to be more productive when talking long term, especially about financial matters, to talk to the new folks coming in, because he is essentially in that lame duck position at the end of his term. He knows he's not reoffering and wouldn't be in that role again.
But the needs of the citizens and the needs of the visitors aren't driven by whether or not the chamber can sit at the table. I'm sure there's a joke in somewhere in the notion of sitting, but we are providing them with that basic service when they come to our town. And it still is only in 2 locations. And it is part of the accessibility policy that we are pursuing, to have those available. All right? Okay. That's it for staff reports. Let's go on to committee reports. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 committee reports. First one, Lunenburg County Senior Safety Program. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Carver.
Yes, I just wanted to point out that in the senior safety report, the numbers of the nature of the referrals and the high number of referrals around housing, precarious housing. I mean, that situation is certainly not getting better. And also the high number around elder abuse. I found that number quite concerning.
Is that in
Anyway.
Mahone Bay in particular, Councillor Carver?
Oh, not in Mahone Bay in particular, no. Those nature of referrals or the reasons for referral are across the region, or across the county. So I don't know the nature of the referrals for Mahone Bay specifically.
Okay.
It's just worth noting that a trend, a pattern.
Yep. The elder abuse piece is particularly unsettling, I think. Any questions? Let's go to the MJSB board minutes of March 24th and May 26th. No. The Remo minutes of July 19th. All pretty dated stuff. And finally, the most recent, the Watershed Committee minutes from last week, first week of October. Councillor Now.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that the Watershed Committee is still looking at the risk assessment for the area and what we can
Yes.
do to mitigate it. So that's continuing, and it'll be brought up again at our next meeting on the 15th November.
A good discussion, I thought, at the last meeting on the risk assessment piece. Have we ever heard back from TIR about salting and sanding?
Not
I
at this
recall the
point.
committee had determined to write to TIR to request them to use sand on the roadways in particular areas.
I think we went right to the top with that request, so it'll probably actually take a while to get a response with everything on the minister's desk.
Okay.
I don't think that we had any like appropriate local contact for it, so we just sent it into the top, and I'm sure they've got a lot with the new minister.
Hopefully we'll soon hear on that one.
Okay. That's it for committee reports. Under new business, Councillor Wilson. Notification of 2 motions.
That's correct, Your Worship. I understand I need to give you the topics, so I'll just do that. Motion number 1 will be a motion for council to appoint a small and temporary subcommittee to review the activities and procedures that surround the genesis of the town hall renovation project from its beginning in the early part of 2020 to its completion around now, with a view to looking at where things may or may not have gone awry procedurally to result in the over budget situation we're in.
Okay.
Number 2, and I may be wrong about this, but I don't think we have a policy at Town Hall regarding COVID vaccination and employment status for staff or for council, and I will be proposing a motion for that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Clerk, you okay with all that? Okay. Then that completes our business to this point. We will now First, we're going to check with the public to see if anyone there has a question.
No questions, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Then I would entertain a motion to go in camera. We've got three issues under the Municipal Government Act 22-2A, acquisition, sale, lease, and security of municipal property. 22-2E, contract negotiations, and 22-2H, public safety. Councillor Burdick moves, Councillor Feeney seconds, all in favor? Thank you.